All right, hello to those who are just joining us, those early enters, and thanks for joining us. And just give us a few minutes while we let others join in, and we'll get started. Okay, well, we have about 10 people here, and we'll just get started, and I'm sure more will join in as we start. But want to introduce everybody to tonight's Jumpstart Germantown JUMPinar. And this is our weekly webinar series that we do like about every other Monday night, probably bi-weekly coming here into the new year. But we host a webinar on a variety of topics in real estate development, everything from financing to construction to green building and street trees, like our topic tonight with our guests from the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. We're going to be talking about how your life can be better with street trees and how developers can kind of implement them into their lives and businesses, and learn about the programs that Pennsylvania Horticultural Society offers. And our guests are Mindy Maislin and Tim Eiffel, and I'll introduce them in just a second after we get through some housekeeping stuff. The first, I want to remind everybody before Maeva tells us about our loan programs. I just want to let everybody know that our training program is accepting applications always. We're actually currently enrolling folks in the upcoming winter 2022 training program. So that starts on February 1st, but apply as soon as possible so we can get your information and enroll you if you're interested. We had planned to do it in person, but unfortunately, with the recent rise in COVID, we've had to move it to a virtual format. So, if you weren't able to join us beforehand because of the in-person attendance, maybe it'll fit your schedule now. We're also enrolling people from outside of Germantown throughout the city rather than just local folks as we were from before. So go to our website, Jumpstart Germantown, and check that out. And I'll let Maeva take it over for a second to tell us about our loan programs that we also offer.
Hi everyone. So the Jumpstart Germantown and Jumpstart Philly loan programs offer short-term financing for the acquisition and renovation of residential properties in different Philadelphia's neighborhood. It is open to first-time and experienced developers, so it is a great opportunity to get funding for new projects or to continue different projects. So I added the link to the applications and more information about the programs in the chat. And let us know if you have more questions about it, but we also look forward to seeing your applications.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maeva. Just a reminder, if you have any questions for our guests tonight, just enter them into the Q&A function, which is on your Zoom toolbar there. And we'll hold them till the end and ask them in one bunch. So feel free to drop them in there as we get going here. But like I said, our guests tonight are with us from the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. Their names are Tim Eiffel and Mindy Maislin. Mindy is the program manager of Tree Tenders, which is one of the programs she'll be telling us about tonight. And Tim is the director of trees with PHS. And I'm happy to have them here and excited for their presentation and discussion tonight. How's it going?
Awesome. Thank you.
Of course.
So, Tim, did you want to share your screen? And
Sure, I can start it up. And do you want to let's see. Well, yeah, I'll get it up and running.
Yeah, no problem.
I just
And
want to, while he's, I'm sorry.
no, you're good. You're good. I just wanted to welcome you guys and thanks for presenting. One thing, like I don't know, I love when we cover these topics about things that are aside from numbers and the details of a real estate transaction. So it's exciting to talk about something like this, and excited to see what you have.
Excellent.
All right, great. I hope everyone can see that at this point.
Yep. Yep.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, and thanks for the introduction, Derek. Again, my name is Tim. I'm the Director of Trees at PHS, and happy to be here with my colleague, Mindy. So we're going to tell you a little bit about why we do what we do and why it's important for communities. And we have a lot of great programs at PHS, but of course, tonight, as you glean from the subject of the topic, that we'll be talking mostly about trees and street trees in particular. So we're very excited to hear from you and hear some of your questions at the end. So PHS, we're actually one of the oldest nonprofits in the city. We've been around for close to 200 years now. And we work all over Philadelphia and the surrounding 5-county area. And what we do at PHS is advance the greater good through horticulture and plants. So we believe that plants have the power to build strong relationships among people, create healthy living environments, increase access to fresh food, and expand economic opportunity. And you can see how important all of those goals are for so many Philadelphia neighborhoods. And trees in particular really fit in with several of those. Here's how we deliver our impact at PHS. We partner with neighborhoods across the region. So this is across all of our programs, not just trees, but we really try to have a neighborhood focus, and all of our programs are driven by the needs, desires, and energy of the residents of those neighborhoods. So you can see some folks here working in one of the many community gardens that we partner with all across the region and support in that way. And of course, we'll be talking about the Tree Tenders program, which also has that neighborhood partnership model. We provide free public gardens and landscapes around the region. So if you visit certain parts of the city, the Azalea Garden near the Art Museum, Logan Circle, the Rodin Museum, and some other areas along the Parkway. The Navy Yard has some of our public garden areas as well. You can see some beautiful parts of the city that contribute overall to health and well-being of Philadelphia residents and visitors. We engage with gardeners and garden lovers and plant lovers as change agents as well. And this is one of the things we want to talk to you about tonight, is how you can take on leadership in your neighborhood by planting and caring for trees, and how that will lead to so many direct benefits for the residents of that neighborhood. And then finally, this is how a lot of people do know us, but we produce the Philadelphia Flower Show and other events every year. Flower Show will be back in June for the second time outdoors, so hopefully all of you can see it. It is, I think, really magical outside in FDR Park. So, actually, I want to stay on this slide for one sec. So we've got a number of different programs that I think can benefit the neighborhoods where Jumpstart works. Again, we're going to focus almost entirely on trees tonight. That's our focus, and that's what Mindy and I do. But I also want to highlight our community gardens programs, and we support dozens of community gardens across the region in just about every part of Philadelphia, which is a real boon to residents who want to be spending time outside, want to be gardening, want to be growing their own fresh food. We have the Land Care program, which manages 12,000 vacant parcels all around the city. So out of the 40,000 vacant lots in Philadelphia, PHS and our partners clean and green 12,000 of them every year. So if you drive around and you see lots that have freshly mowed grass in the summer and those post and rail fences around them and have their litter picked up every couple of weeks, that's through the Land Care program that we manage. And there's so many benefits to having those vacant lots clean, like just removing trash. There's, the improved aesthetics. It reduces violence in the neighborhood as well, and discourages people from further illegal dumping. We also have the Rain Check program, which is a partnership with the water department, and that is a way for residents to install subsidized stormwater management tools on their own property. So you can get, if you attend a rain check workshop, you can get a free rain barrel installed at your house, and then you can get subsidized other tools like permeable pavers or even rain gardens in your yard. So check that one out too. All this is, of course, on the PHS website. But tonight, we're really here to talk to you about tree tenders in particular, which is, I think the heart of all of our tree programming. And we have a couple other tree programs, but tree tenders is really the heart of it. And it's coming up to its 30-year anniversary. And it all started with my wonderful colleague, Mindy. So Mindy, do you want to take over and introduce that program?
You bet. Thank you. So really delighted to be here tonight because you folks, developers, landowners, your trees are your friends. And so often people don't understand the important value of trees. The tree tender program works to make that evident to as many people as possible. So we do a training program that's an 8-hour class that we offer over 4 nights on Zoom these days. To citizens that just want to learn the basics of how to plant and care for trees and how to advocate for them. And that's really critical because it all comes down to money and how much money the city has to be able to put forth into tree work in the city, to keeping our trees healthy, which makes them more desirable to homeowners also. So the training is, we have a training program coming up starting this Thursday. So if anybody wants to jump in on that, you can let me know. I put the link to tree tenders in the chat so you can find it there and find out about our classes. The classes that we offer will be on Thursdays, so the next 4 Thursdays from 6 to 8. And when people come to the trainings, it's a decentralized program, so it's neighborhood based. And we ask people to come with neighbors and form tree tender groups that then are able to organize tree plantings in their own neighborhoods. So the idea is that people can make their own neighborhoods greener, healthier, happier by planting trees and keeping them healthy. That's kind of the real skinny on it. I can give you lots more information as we go forward. But I wanted to take an opportunity right now to talk about why, to developers, to landowners in general, the trees are really, really critical. And one of my heroes is a woman named Kathleen Wolfe, who's out of Seattle. And she did work on how trees influence and are important to business districts. And one of the things she said is that it's almost an unknown fact that trees really do make a business district, that downtown districts where there are trees are happier places. People are willing to shop longer, to kind of idle around and look through stores if it's a pleasant place to be. They spend more money. They'll even spend more for parking just for the benefit of being able to shop somewhere where there are trees and where it's welcoming. That one of the things she wrote that I thought was fascinating was that customers are influenced long before they ever enter a store. The first impressions about a business district start at the curb, where people see what's happening in this neighborhood. And if it's a pleasant, happy place to be, people are drawn there. Oftentimes when people shop and go out to restaurants or just to buy shoes, that they're looking to do it's a social event. And it matters where they are and how that looks. Not only that, but we know that trees also are really critical for residential areas. That where there are trees, and Tim alluded to this with vacant lots also, but where there are trees in neighborhoods, that there's less violence, that police departments are on board throughout the nation on this one, that there's less violence because people are calmer, they're happier. Life expectancy is increased on streets that have trees. People, where there are trees, they meet their neighbors, and that increases their sense of community, and a sense of community where you have community that's involved with each other, then people know more what's going on in the streets, and the streets are safer. So property values go up where there are streets with trees on them, and people tend to stay longer. So that's just kind of the real quick and dirty on trees and how important they are to people that are property owners of any kind. But what I wanted to do with most of this time today is go through some of the top questions that people have about trees. And at this point, I'd want to stop and say, well, do you have any questions about what I just said? But we're saving those questions to the end, right, Derek?
Yeah, that's great. And I just wanted to say, like, I really resonate with what you said about it, like, it just makes the neighborhood a healthier, happier place. I mean, even not being there, just like a lot of what we do as a lender is like research comps that people send, and they say like, hey, look at these properties that have recently sold nearby that are selling for the same amount as my subject property. And if it has street trees, I'm more likely to think that it's a nicer, more developed or at least maintained neighborhood that, the block captains care about the the appearance of it, whatnot. So even from a like, you don't even just have to be there. It's like from a geographic standpoint, it makes it definitely a more valuable area. So that's great.
Yeah. And business districts tend to be kind of the heart and soul of communities.
Yeah,
And where they look nice, then those communities flourish.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
thank you for
Yeah.
that.
So, and no questions yet. So go right on ahead.
Okay. So how does this affect where do tree tenders come in with this? Well, the tree tender program twice a year does a big group buy of trees, and we're able to cut concrete, remove it, and plant trees without an expense in Philadelphia for business owners. And that's huge. And we're able to do this and do it at a very reasonable cost because it's all volunteer coordinated. So the volunteers, they arrange for community members to come out and plant the trees and then to follow up with them to make sure they're being cared for. So this past November, we planted 1,350 trees throughout the region in one weekend. And this involved over 1,000 volunteers. It was over 80 community groups came together to do these plantings in their own neighborhoods. So we tell you this to make you salivate and want a tree tender group in your own neighborhood, and to maybe consider coming out to our tree tender training. That'll be starting on Thursday. If Thursdays aren't good, all of our trainings on Zoom are recorded. So like with these sessions, you can watch them at your convenience.
Yeah.
So
That's great. And would you say, do you have like developers or people who own investment properties get involved with the tree tenders program, or do you see mostly just homeowners, kind of people wanting to work in their own community?
yeah, it's both actually. We have a group of developers that we're working with now in the Brewery Town neighborhood.
Oh, cool.
And so that's something that we haven't honestly had enough of that, and we're hoping to have more. And that's why I'm so excited to talk to you folks.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah. So, oh, Tim, I think you have to advance. I'm trying to.
Yeah, I forgot that it's not letting me. Oh, there we go. Oh,
Yeah,
people love trees. There you go.
People do love trees. They all the time.
One more ahead.
So, yeah. So I wanted to go through some of the more common tree questions, things that come up. One of them that you might have heard is that people are afraid of trees because they're afraid the roots are going to get into their sewers. And that is something that it's an interesting question. I mean, if you look at the trees on the left here, is that the left? I'm always confused here. You see two different drawings of trees, one that have roots go down really deep, and the other, the roots are on the surface. Can you in the chat say which one you think is correct? Are the tree roots shallow or are they deep? So here I'm challenging you to participate. There we go. I got one from yes, thank you. Deep, 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 deep.
Oh, it's a mix.
Yeah, sure is.
We're clearly more in the know about construction, not quite nature.
Yeah. Well, tree roots grow in the top 18 to 24 inches of the soil. And they do that because they're looking to get the nutrients, water, oxygen that they need from the soil. And also by growing wide, if you think about it, if you stand with your legs wide, you have a better stance. It's less likely that you're going to be pushed over. Same with the tree. If the tree's roots were all going straight down, it wouldn't be as stable in a big wind. So this is important when you think about where the pipes are. And so you guys might know the answer to this better. How far down are your laterals? That's a question for the chat. There we go, 3 feet, 6 feet. That's what I've always heard. Okay. So we gave it away. That's why nobody else is answering. 4.5, 6 to 8. Okay. So most of the pipes are 6 feet underground. They're under the frost line. And so how is it that the tree roots would go into those pipes? I mean, they're smart, but they're not smart enough to know anything is in the pipes unless the pipes are already leaking. And Philadelphia has so many old terracotta pipes that oftentimes they are leaking. And it's not, so the tree roots aren't causing the problem, but they are exasperating it once it occurs, once it's already cracked. There is a new insurance policy that you can get. I believe, Tim, is it $7 a month? You can get through
I think that's right. Something like that, $6 or $7, I want to say.
To protect, so that if there is any problem with tree roots and your pipes, then you're protected. With any problem with your pipes, you're protected. There you go, American Water Resources. Thank you, Tiffany. So any questions about that? Okay, I'm going to move on a little bit. Oh, Tim, next one.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so the second one I want to talk about is tree roots and sidewalks. Has anyone ever heard about trees lifting sidewalks? Right? I think many people have heard that as a problem. Well, you know, in a way, it's kind of like if you put a tree in a very small pit opening in the ground and the tree needs to grow, it's sort of like complaining when your 2-year-old that you put in a shirt is now 5 years old and they're popping out of the shirt, right? It's not really the kid's fault and it's not the tree's fault. The reason that it's doing it is because as a living thing, it needs to grow. So what we need to do is make sure that we put the right tree in the right place in a tree opening that's large enough to accommodate it into its adult life. And by doing that, we know an awful lot more about trees than we used to. And if you look at all the old London plane trees that are spilling over sidewalks in West Philly and in Germantown, that we know better than to put such a large tree in a small opening. And hopefully we'll avoid those problems because of that knowledge. Any questions with that? Okay, whoops, I'm still trying to forward it, Tim.
Did I go too? There we go.
Okay, so one of the most important things that we talk about with trees that's incredibly crucial, and if you get one thing out of this lecture tonight, sorry, it's not a lecture, is it? It's a, because hopefully we're going to have dialogue. So if you get one thing out of it, it's to understand that every tree has a root flare. And that root flare is the part of the tree where the trunk ends and the roots begin. And that's really critical because trunks like to be exposed to the sun, dry out in between rains, be exposed to the air. And the roots like to be underground where it's wet and dark and moist, right? So if you bury the trunk of a tree, like in this picture in the middle, then you're putting underground the trunk, the bark of the tree that isn't very happy in that environment, which means that it can often start to rot. And that can be the beginning of the end for a tree. So burying a tree, planting a tree at the right depth is really critical. And I think the next one that we're going to talk about is mulch, I hope. Is that? There you go. So, which brings to mind mulch, because oftentimes, let's say the tree was planted correctly, and if it's planted by a tree tender group, hopefully it will be. But then you have people come, landscapers that come and mulch your tree. Well, the mulching, has anyone ever seen any of these things we call mulch volcanoes? Mm-hmm. And mulch volcanoes are evil. And if you were in a live class with me, I'd make you say that, but I'll spare you. So mulch volcanoes are evil because they bury the trunk of the tree and they don't allow it to air out, and they can cause rot. So what your tree's mulch should look like, it should still have that root flare exposed. So we say when you're mulching, use a 3-3-3 roll, no more than 3 inches thick, 3 feet around, and 3 inches from the trunk. Okay. And questions about mulch? Yeah, this is cool. So this shows you what are the values of mulch. They're sort of like chicken soup for trees. They do everything. They keep the ground cooler in the summer. They keep the roots cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter. They put nutrients into the soil. They keep weed whackers away and lawnmowers. And they hold more moisture around the tree's roots. But if you look at this is a photo from Bartlett Tree Experts that show tree roots underneath grass and underneath mulch. And you see that mass of tree roots that you get when you have mulch as opposed to grass, which is in a lithopath. It prevents tree roots from growing. It steals nutrients and oxygen and water from those tree roots. So where you have more tree roots, you're going to have a healthier tree. So this is one of my favorite pictures to demonstrate why mulch is important. So we could go on. How are we doing for time?
It's 7:26.
Yeah, I think we're doing great. We're doing
Okay.
great.
So are folks up for this, or can I see, like, I don't know, raise your hand. Let me know if you're happy. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to see raised hands actually.
Jihad and a couple other folks are raising their hands, and
Okay.
we got people are enthused. Keep on.
Okay, good. So we'll keep on going.
Yes.
So
Rachel said she is deeply interested, so we must move forward.
excellent. Okay. So should you plant flowers around your tree? What do you think? How many people say yes to every kind of flower? How many people say no? I got a no here. And another no. Depends, somebody wrote yes. Okay. So how about, it's taking nutrients from the tree. Excellent point. So generally what we say is don't plant perennials, don't plant things that come back every year because they have the substantial root systems. So especially other woody things like a boxwood. If you plant that around your tree, then it is going to be taking a lot of nutrients, water, oxygen away. But what if you plant just annual flowers that don't have those extensive root systems? Some people say that that's kind of like your canary in a cave, where the annuals will tell you when they're experiencing a drought, when they're not getting enough water. And then you go out there and you water your tree and your flowers, right? Whereas you might not think about watering your tree if you didn't have the flowers there. Hopefully you would, but this is to help remind you. So yes to annuals, not so much so to perennials, especially the woody ones. Okay. And what is a girdling root? Has anyone ever heard of a girdling root? Mm-mm. It's like exactly what you think. It's a girdle on a tree. And we don't wear girdles anymore. I know my grandmother did when I was growing up, but no more of that because people like to breathe. And a girdling root is basically, is that a female tree? No, it's a male tree. That's the funny part. So a girdling root is basically a root that is growing around the tree and strangling it, which is just a nasty way to go. And why do these tree roots do this? It's often because when it was planted, it came maybe from a container that the tree roots were in, the tree was in the container for too long and the roots were growing in a circle. Somebody popped it out of the container, put it in the ground, and the roots kept on growing like they were used to, without knowing there was a whole big world to explore. So girdling roots, number one, can strangle the tree. Number two, the tree isn't getting access to as much water, nutrients, and oxygen from out there, right? They're only getting what this small area is providing. trees aren't stable this way either. If you have too many girdling roots, then the tree in a big windstorm is not going to be stable. So what this means is, number one, planting the tree properly from the get-go, and number two, making sure that if you see girdling roots, and sometimes you do, if you walk around, this is the one main complaint I get from new tree tenders about the class, is that people can't walk down the street in peace anymore. Because you're looking maybe differently at all these potential tree problems that you're seeing on the street. So we've people that go around with tools to help to cut those girdling roots if you see them. And you have to be careful. You don't want to cut them too, very interesting. Yeah, you don't want to cut too big a root, but you want to, it's a little bit of a learning curve there too. And one of the things we do with our tree tender groups is a advanced pruning workshop that is pruning, but it's also root care. And we have one of those coming up this January. Okay, next.
Oops,
Oh, another
there's
example.
one.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. Tim, you want to take one? You want to talk about 3-point?
Sure. So yes, this next slide is about pruning, and I think a lot of people think, oh, I can prune a tree. It's just like, cutting a hedge or, cutting flowers or anything else. And unfortunately, that often leads to mistakes that are pretty bad for the health of a tree. So, we like, if there's like a major pruning job, like a big mature tree, call in an expert, call in an arborist. But especially for young trees or smaller trees, you can do pruning yourself if you just know a little bit of technique. And so this is an example of what we call the 3-point cut. And this is the best way to prune a branch. I think there's two common mistakes people make when they're pruning. The first is just cutting off the branch wherever they think, however long it should be. So if it's too long of a branch, or it's broken, they'll just cut it back to like the midpoint of the branch and be like, there we go, it's fine. But, while that might work for like a boxwood hedge or something like that, it does not work for a tree. You really want to remove the entirety of a branch, or at least cut it back to the union with another branch rather than leaving a stub. A stub is definitely not what you want when you're pruning trees. The other mistake people make is they cut flush to the trunk too close. So you can see on the illustration A, that on the one side, it's kind of like right up flush with the trunk, where actually that looks like more of a tear rather than a cut, or a cut and a tear. And you don't want that either, because on the right side in this other illustration, you have what's the branch collar labeled. And that's a special part of the tree with different cells that serve a different function. So if you want that tree to seal up that wound, and be healthy and keep out disease and pests, you want to keep that branch collar intact, because those are the cells that are going to enclose that cut essentially. So you want to cut right where those black arrows are, which is outside of the branch collar, but you don't want to cut too close, just start like sawing right down. You want to make a 3-point cut, because that illustration A on my left there, shows what happens if you just start cutting. The weight of the branch will start pulling down and tear into that healthy trunk, tear into that branch collar, and leave a much bigger wound that's not going to heal properly. So in illustration B there, you can see a good example of the 3-point cut. The first cut you make is cut number 1, which is maybe a few inches, depending on the size of the branch, away from that branch collar area. And that cut is to prevent tearing. So when you make your full cut, all that weight might come down and tear, but if it does tear, it'll reach that number 1 cut there, rather than going all the way into the branch collar or into the trunk of the tree. So you cut, I don't know, maybe 1/4 to 1/3 into the branch, depending on how thick it is. Then number 2, you just cut off the full branch at the on the outside of that initial cut you made. So you can kind of picture the physics of it in your mind. If you make that number 2 cut, even if the branch kind of snaps or breaks or tears, that first cut you made is going to prevent it from tearing into the tree itself. So you can see if when cutting that number 2 cut, if it starts to crack, you're protecting the rest of the tree from any of that damage. And then finally, after you've cut off the end of the branch, you make the 3rd cut right outside of the branch collar. So right where it kind of like flares out, almost kind of like, similar to that root flare discussion, and the transition into the cells of the branch, which you can see if you look closely. Then you can just cut straight down all the way down. There's not going to be much weight on the branch because you've removed most of the weight already. And cut right down there, and you won't get any tears, especially if you use a nice sharp saw, and you'll leave a nice smooth cut. One way to know you're doing it right is assuming your branch is fairly round. You want that cross section that you're leaving behind to be round rather than oval. So if you have a branch that's kind of coming up at an angle and you cut straight down, you'll leave kind of an oval behind. But if you're cutting straight across the branch at the right outside of the branch collar, you'll leave a nice round cut. And then over the course of, a year or more, depending on how big the branch originally was, it might take 4 or 5 years for a really huge branch. Those branch collar cells will kind of wrap around it and eventually seal it off. So it's a little hard to describe in pictures, but if you're actually at a tree, it's pretty easy to figure out. 1 cut on the bottom outside the branch collar, then cut off the whole branch outside of that, and then remove that little stub you have. And that's the healthiest way to prune a tree. And I don't think this is the next slide, but I will say the 3 most important reasons to prune a tree. Is that at its own slide, Mindy, or should I mention that here?
Yeah, you should mention it.
Okay. The 3 Ds. So if a branch is dead, you should prune it off, because then it's going to, and the tree is of course otherwise alive, remove a dead branch because it could become home to insects or pathogens that could otherwise damage the tree, or it could fall off and cause damage to something below. So removing a dead branch is always important. A damaged branch you should remove as well. So if a windstorm comes along and breaks off a branch like halfway up and leaves a big jagged cut, it doesn't do the tree any good to leave that on there. Again, it could kind of lead to more disease and decay. So you should just remove the rest of that branch down to either the trunk itself or the nearest branch that it's subordinate to, like the larger branch. And then the final reason is disease. So if you can see that there's disease affecting a branch, you should remove that as well, so it doesn't affect the tree, it's the rest of the tree itself. But again, if there's like major branches, or if it's above the ground, if you can't reach it with both feet on the ground, or special equipment is required, people can hurt themselves by getting in over their heads. So always good to call in an expert in those cases. And if it is a street tree in Philadelphia, you should not prune those yourself unless it's a young tree that you had just planted through the Tree Tenders program, then you can. But otherwise, you should request the Philadelphia Parks and Rec street tree office handle that pruning for you. They've got expert arborists and contractors that they hire to do that kind of pruning. So even though that tree is on your responsibility, on your property, PPR has the responsibility for maintaining those trees.
Excellent.
Right. Next one. Oh yeah, here we go. So this is a good example of a flush cut, and you can see that that's not going to heal properly because the branch, too much of the branch collar has been removed. So those healing cells are gone. They've been cut into, so it'll never fully enclose. In the middle, you've got a stub cut. Too much of that branch has been left on, and here you can actually see really well where that branch collar is. So just a few more inches and they would have been able to take it off right to that branch collar. And then the final cut, perfect. You can see they're nice round cross sections. They're not vertical. They're they're perpendicular to the branch itself rather than being parallel to the tree trunk. So your cuts kind of come out and make a little angle because you're cutting perpendicular to the branch rather than parallel to the tree. That's the main key. So.
And they'll be perfect donuts when they start to heal.
Exactly. Yeah, you'll see a cut that's a few years old. It'll look like a little donut until it's fully closed up. All right. Do you want me to keep going with cuts, Mindy, or do you want to take over?
Yeah, I mean, you could if you want. I'm this one, just to avoid topping cuts, just don't do them. It's not a way to reduce the height of a tree. It's a way to cause internal decay. And most people say if you're going to do this kind of cut, instead of doing what those 8 or 9 cuts that they made, just do one at the base, because it's going to die, and it's a slow, nasty death there. So avoid topping cuts.
You'll see, yeah, those are great examples of those stubs. And like normally it's one stub, but they turn the whole tree into a stub. You'll see professional landscape companies do that sometimes, which drives me absolutely insane. And then, yeah, it's you're not doing your tree any favors by doing that. All right, here's the actual next question. You want to take over on this one, Mindy?
Sure. We'll just finish up real quick so we have enough time for questions and answers. Just wanted to show you what was inside a tree. A lot of people are curious as to what part of the tree is alive. And in fact, the only real living part of the tree is this right here, the cambium, that makes the xylem and the phloem. Oopsie, sorry about that. There's that, and the xylem or the phloem are the highways that carry the nutrients up and down from the roots. They draw in the water, and it comes up to the leaves, and the leaves make that glucose food, photosynthesis, remember, and send that down to the all the way down to the roots. And so the only living part is right here, which is why it's so, if you carve your initials, I love trees, and you put a heart on a tree, you're cutting into the only living part of that tree where those highways are. And so the middle part, the heartwood, is all for structure, but it's nothing living in there. Oops, next one, Tim.
Sorry. There you go.
And this, I think, is fascinating. It's if you have a branch, let's say that I'm a tree and I'm 5.5 feet tall, and my arms are 5 feet off the ground. When I grow another 10 feet, where will my branches, where will these arms be? How far off the ground? So they're 5 feet off the ground now. I'm going to grow another 10 feet. How far will they be off the ground? I'm looking at that chat.
This is the most like a classroom our JUMPinars have ever felt. I love it.
Okay, so what I'm asking, yes, it is a trick question. There you go. Thank you, Keith. I'll end that there. The tree grows from the tip up. So my branches will always be 5 feet off the ground, even when I'm twice as tall. Those branches don't move, which is important when you think about pruning a tree, because that branch that's just a little bit, going into the line of traffic or going into the street where pedestrians walk, that branch is not going to grow out of the way. So it's better, once the tree is a little bit older, to cut that before it gets to be a huge limb that's in harm's way. And there you go, next. So benefits, kids need trees. Where kids with ADHD are exposed to trees, they can pay attention longer, retain more, feel calmer. Trees encourage exercise. So where there are trees and in natural areas, kids spend more time outside, so they're healthier. And in fact, it's crazy. In some parts of North Philly, the obesity rate for kids is over 50%. They need nature. And that asthma rates go down on tree-lined streets. So trees are incredibly important for kids. Next. And they help to build communities. We talked about this. Where there are trees on streets, people meet each other. They spend more time out on their stoops, so they know what's going on in the neighborhoods, and that creates a sense of community. Okay, next. And all these things are why trees are worth it. And that $1,425 is the environmental benefits that come from trees. There's a program called iTree, the letter I tree, where you can actually put in a tree, the age of it, the caliber of it, the species, and come up with the value that it gives us each year. Okay, next. So are trees worth it? Some say that pictures are worth 1,000 words. If you look at this is actually a visualization. It's not a real picture, but look at what a street could look like before and after with trees planted on it. And think about your mood as you leave your house in one versus the other. Okay. And the second one.
I'll add, there's that fence, that's a good example of one of our land care lots, and that's one, some of them have trees planted on them. So
Yeah.
on both sides of the street are lots that have been maintained by PHS or one of its partners.
Okay. And the last one.
That's it.
That's it. Hey, we made a good time, huh?
That was
We
awesome.
did.
Well, thank you both for that excellent presentation. That was really fun and an interesting discussion. I'm glad you had the time to join us tonight. I had just a quick question, if I could start things off, and then hopefully a couple more questions will be submitted here. So from the perspective of a developer, somebody who, maybe just got their first property under agreement and are really excited about developing it, and it's on a street with no trees, or maybe there's a couple dead trees down the block, or they see that as being something they want to bring to the neighborhood. As a developer, as that property owner, like, where would you point them, and what would you say, like, are the steps to bringing, like, just to give people like somewhere direct they can go, or I know the tree tenders program is a certainly a great start, but like, what is what does that process look like of turning a barren street, like from the perspective of somebody who just rehabbed a house, what does the process look like of bringing trees there?
Yeah. So Tim, do you want, I mean, maybe I can share my screen, or could you do it and show them the tree tender map?
Yeah, I can put mine back up.
Okay.
I have it open already. Okay, so except hold on one sec.
It's an excellent question. Thank you, Derek. It's
Yeah, of course.
So tree
Okay.
tenders, oops, it's all zoomed in weird. So
Oh.
there we go. Let me zoom out. Okay. So this map, which is on the PHS website, if you go to phsonline.org and then visit the tree section, you can find this map. And this is all of our tree tender groups, which, as we said, they're the neighborhood-based groups that plant and care for trees in their neighborhood. So the best thing would be to find out if there is a group in your neighborhood and get involved with them. And then neighbors can get together and plant and care for trees on those properties that you're working on or maintaining in order to improve the overall neighborhood, and also I'll add to the property value. So if you can enter in your address up here, and it'll just zoom right in. So this is the PHS office. And then you kind of click anywhere outside there. That's my search result. That's not what I wanted. So click over here and it'll tell you what the tree tender group is for your neighborhood, Logan Square Tree Tenders, and the contact information. You can always contact us directly and we can help you connect with them there. But one of the best ways is to find your group that way through the map. I will say too that there are a lot of, well, not too many, but there are some holes in our map, as you can see, where there is no tree tender group. So if you are in one of those areas, we would love for you and your neighbors to start one. And Mindy mentioned the process for doing that, getting 3 or more neighbors to take the class together, and then starting small, organizing a small scale planting, and then kind of building up from there every cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the most important things that a developer could do is, if they're redoing sidewalks, is to leave the openings for trees.
Right.
And that's more than half the cost of our plantings.
Mhm.
So getting a concrete cut could cost $200 and the tree could cost $100.
Yeah, sure.
So if-
And I'm sure that's especially relevant in like a situation where someone's buying, rehabbing, and then selling the property. If they leave that hole there, it's kind of like they have no choice but to put a tree in it, right?
Yeah, so it's important to contact the city first and make
Right,
sure
so-
that you're putting the hole in the right place.
Right. So that was as my next question was going to be, like, what should people not do? Because I don't want people to go and think they can just rip up the concrete and plant a tree on their street, and that's them doing their part. clearly, there's a network of people to get connected with. So, kind of the first step, as you're saying, is get connected with the people who know how to do it and are doing it, and then, it'll go from there, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that street trees are the purview of PPR, Parks and Rec, the street tree office, and they do require a permit to plant. And it's a free permit. So if you go through tree tenders, you don't have to pay anything. We'll handle the permit if you put in a request for a tree. And I'll show you on our website. You can go to get a tree. This is the PHS website. If you navigate to for neighborhoods, tree programs, and then get a tree, you can slide down here. This kind of goes through the whole process. Find your local tree tenders group. Here is the street tree application. And you can fill that out, and we'll, it's slowly loading, but you get the idea. And then we just ask for determines which we can plant. And it also has, if you scroll down, information about where trees can't be planted. So like you can't plant right in front of a step or a doorway.
Fire code.
Yeah, you have to be so much of a distance from traffic lights, from light poles, from fire hydrants, from driveways. The sidewalk has to be at least 3 feet wide because you need the tree pit itself. I mean, sorry, at least 6 feet wide because you need at least 3 feet of width for a tree pit. And then you also need to have for ADA clearances at least 3 feet of clearance around that pit for travel around it. So that means minimum of 6-foot sidewalks, which not every block in Philadelphia has. So there are going to be properties that will not be eligible for street trees for that reason. But really most places can have them. And yeah, we do encourage you to get involved with your local tree tender group to get them planted.
Awesome. That's great. And I want to make sure I move on and take care of these questions here before we hit the hour mark. The next one comes from Mundi or Muddy, and they're asking, is there any law protecting me from the law or for protecting me from someone suing me if my tree falls on someone's car or property? Especially after storms and stuff, I'm sure this is a concern, and people, that might be a reason to dissuade them from putting it on their investment project. What is the problem around that?
Well, Mindy, do you want me to take this one, or would you?
Sure, I would love for you to.
Okay. I will say first off that, any kind of like legal liability questions are always like a little bit tricky. And so this is, my answers are very general, like every situation is different. And, that's what like a lawyer would want me to say. But the gist of it is, generally speaking, if a tree on your property falls due to like natural causes, like a storm, or just the tree, eventually dying and a branch falls off and it damages your neighbor's car or your neighbor's property, you would not be like personally liable for that. Like generally their insurance would cover that. The exception is if there's a tree that is a hazard, and you do nothing about it and they can prove that, then that can kind of tilt the liability onto you, and then your insurance company would get involved with that. Which doesn't happen too often, luckily. I mean, most people are responsible if they know they have hopefully if they know they have a hazard tree, they'll find ways of dealing with it. The other thing is, like, if you are trying to like cut the tree yourself and then something happens as a result, then you can be personally liable in that case. But if a storm knocks over your tree, which is going to happen, to some people's trees and storms, we've seen that, then that's not going to be a personal liability for you. And then I'll also add, remember for street trees in particular, there's kind of a weird situation because they are your property. You own the tree if you own the property, but the maintenance is the city's responsibility. So it kind of creates some, there's a level of protection for you. So again, unless you know there's a problem with the tree and never reported it to the city or something, or you were trying to prune it yourself and that caused damage to something else, you wouldn't really have to worry in that situation.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the Philly Tree Plan, which is a new comprehensive 10-year plan for trees in the city, that is going to address some of these issues even more so of protection for property owners. I will say, and what you said is great, Tim. I would just add that trees are living things. And as with any living thing, you have to weigh the benefit and the potential risk. And that's, I mean, that really is the answer I mostly give, that there's always potential risk, but the benefits are benefits that we need to live happily in urban areas.
Yeah, it sounds like as long as you're doing the right thing and making, following the guidelines and making the right choices, that you should never have a problem with it. But like you said, Tim, I certainly understand anything legal needs to be
Yeah.
reclaimed.
I mean, it's like anything else with your house. Like if you're
Yeah.
maintaining your house in good faith and a freak storm knocks your chimney onto your neighbors, you're fine. But if you clearly aren't maintaining it and your neighbor has told you many times to fix that chimney, then that might be an issue for you. But
Okay, great. All right, well, moving on to our next question here. It comes from Keith, and he's wondering, do you have any stats on how many trees survive at yearly intervals post-planting? So I guess what's the likelihood that your street tree is going to stick around for a while?
Yeah, so the trees that we plant, we this summer after we plant, so we plant in the spring and we plant in the fall. And every summer we go back with our tree tender groups, they go back and they check on the trees that they planted. It's two things. One, to remind the homeowner how to take care of their tree and to take care of it. And two, it's citizen science to gather data and find out how our trees are growing, how they're growing, how, what their survival rate is. So after the first year, our survival rate is about 94%.
Great.
And which is great. We're very happy with that. Yeah.
Cool. And Keith had one more question about, he was wondering if PHS can remove overgrown weed trees and replace it with a more appropriate tree. Is there like a specific service you offer, or would that, or what would somebody do if they have a problem tree and wanted to get it replaced?
Yeah, so that's a big problem, and hopefully the Philly Tree Plan will address that, because a lot of people are, when they think of trees, they think of the weed trees that are in their alleyway. We do not have the resources to remove dead trees or to grind out the stumps, but once it's open, we're able to then help replant. A lot of times, we tell people go to your council people. They might have some walking around money to put towards that, or but the city generally doesn't have the funds to do that unless it's a hazard tree. If it's reported to them as a hazard tree, then they're obligated to take care of it.
Right. That's not the first time I've heard on a JUMPinar that the city doesn't have funds to do something. So I appreciate your answer to that. Okay, and the last question for tonight is going to be from Donald, and he was wondering, are there specific trees that are planted in different areas of the city? And what are your guys' thoughts on fruit trees? I would love to have some fruit trees on my block.
Yeah, except for, think of like apples falling on your car.
Yeah, that too.
So the city has a list of approved street trees. When we do a planting, like I said, we had 1,350 trees we planted, and I think it was over 50 species.
Oh, wow.
If you think of emerald ash borer coming in and killing off all of our ash trees, we want to make sure that any one species isn't a good percentage, isn't a large percentage of our tree population, so that if something comes in like the emerald ash borer, we're not going to lose 25% of our trees. Okay. So diversity is really, really important. And planting the right tree in the right spot, looking at, are there overhead wires? What's the setback to the building? How big of a pit can we have? We want to plant, ultimately, we would love to plant all the big trees because they have the most environmental benefits. But not every site can handle a big tree.
Okay.
And I'll add, related to fruit trees. At PHS, our tree tenders program, at least in Philadelphia proper, focuses almost entirely on street trees with a few exceptions. but we have a sister program, Tree Philly, which is run by the city itself, that offers free yard trees all around the city every spring and fall. A very, very excellent program, and they frequently offer fruit trees, which are, for some of the reasons that Mindy discussed, generally more appropriate for yards. So there are opportunities to plant fruit trees in yards, and generally you can get them free from the city, along with kind of advice on how to take care of them as well. The Philly Orchard Project is another good resource for that, because they maintain orchards around the city, so you can get involved if you don't have space in your own yard to plant fruit trees, especially because sometimes you need multiple trees depending on the species to actually get fruit out of it. But you can get involved with them if you want to get involved with growing fruit. They're all over the city, and they also have a lot of good resources as well if you want to learn more about growing your own fruit.
Okay. All right, awesome. Well, that does it for the questions, and I think we can go ahead and wrap it up for tonight. Thank you so much, Tim and Mindy. I thought that was a really awesome discussion. I appreciate both of your time on this Monday night. And I'm going to, Mindy, I know you had sent me like a couple links of articles and stuff before the session. I'm going to forward those out to everybody in like a follow-up email tomorrow, if that's all right with you.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I put in the chat, the PHS a website and the tree tender direct page.
Cool. Yep. I'll put all those links in an email out to everybody, as well as both your contact information, if that's all right, so people can get in touch.
Yeah.
By all means.
All right. Awesome. Well, before we close out, I just want to let people know what we have coming up. Not next week, but 2 weeks from now, we'll be discussing coding in terms of real estate development and how you can, I actually am not too sure. I haven't had the prep discussion, but I assume we're talking with a group from Wilmington who, discusses how to code or how to work code into your real estate development projects and how to utilize that as an investor. And then the first week of February, we're talking about solar states, another environmentally friendly JUMPinar like tonight's, with Micah Gold-Markle in a few weeks. So stay tuned for that. The registration for those pages is held at jumpstartgermantown.com/events, and you can just go there and get them on your calendar. If you want to watch a recording of the full JUMPinar, you can go to jumpstartgermantown.com/JUMPinars. And the 2 hour or the hour-long Zoom recording will be there for you if you missed it or want to send it out to anybody. And then I'll be producing, or actually, I might be able to produce some of the audio into a podcast, but I don't want to, have people miss out without the slides and everything. So might just be a video-only version, but that's totally okay. I think it's just as useful. So yeah, that does it, and I think that's all we got. I appreciate both of your time, and hope you have a good night.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
See ya.
Thanks, Derek.
See you later, Mindy.
Good job, Tim.